Видишь, все отвлекает. Это вся фигня, блин, да. Да, всем, видишь, да, что же тут такого? Нормально, ага. Деньги потратил. Ну, следующее. Пишут письма. Даже с тобой об этом никто не спрашивает.
Hi, I'm Sean Levine. I'm a writer, an artist, an editor, and a creative writer. The things that I'm passionate about are at the heart of all the books that I've written. I brought my love of baking into my book, 7 Sweet Things. Photography was the inspiration for my book, Snapshots of the Boy. And my book, Trees at a Sanatorium, and Isaac Rosenberg's Journey to Arras were inspired by painters and painters. Storytelling doesn't have to be about major conflict and cliffhangers. The drama emerges when you slow down and notice the details of your imagination and what is there in front of you. In this sense, writing is no different from painting or drawing. The best way to make something creative out of your everyday and what is around you is to carry a notebook with you wherever you go. After all, the best way to learn how to write is to write. In this Domestica course, you'll find the most impactful way to tell your story and discover the importance of looking for and using the precise words to describe the world we create. As a final project, I'll write a piece about my passion for learning. Along with me, I'll invite you to write a piece about something that you love doing. To do this, I'll start by showing you some of the materials that I use in order to write.
Hey, welcome back to another lesson. Today we are talking about one of my absolute favorite scales. It is called Mixolydian Flat 6. And it is exactly how I described it. It is a Mixolydian scale, but we've just flatted the 6th note. You can also think of this as being the 5th mode of the melodic minor scale. So if you take an average melodic minor scale and begin playing it starting on the 5th note, you'll end up with the same set of half steps and whole steps. I really, really like the scale. It's got a wonderful tonality to it, a wonderful feel. To me, it's kind of like a wonder scale, like an awe-inspiring scale. There's a lot of floatiness, a lot of disconnectedness, but a lot of cool emotions kind of floating around here. So one way to think of it is like half major and half minor, and let's just kind of work our way through it here. We basically have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a flatted 6, and a flatted 7, all right? And then we can come back to our root. We have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flatted 6, flatted 7, and then our root and our major 2nd, major 3rd. So you can hear that the first half of this is fairly major. Those first 5 notes are just screaming out major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that flatted 6th makes a huge difference in the way the scale feels. Just going up and down that. That's a pretty neat, little sequence right there, just going up and down. Gives a little bit of mystery. Major's very happy, very bright. And that major 3rd can actually sound pretty mysterious if you surround it with that flatted 6th like we're doing here. Okay? So essentially what I want you to think about doing is figuring out the chords that are available to us in this scale, Mixolydian Flat 6. And when you do that, you'll see that we're allowed to play a major 1 chord. We're also allowed to play a minor 4 chord. We're allowed to play a minor 5 chord. And we're allowed to play a major flatted 7th chord. Okay? Those are the only major and minor chords we have access to in this key. We have access to quite a few diminished chords. There's 2 diminished chords we have access to, and there's also an augmented chord built off the 6th fret. Diminished chords and augmented chords are traditionally pretty hard to use when you're composing, so I'm not going to worry so much about those right now. Between those 2, I think your augmented is your best choice. I think in the key of A, for example, this F augmented actually works fairly well, coming back to the 1 chord of A major. So this is my 6th chord, F augmented, resolving back to my 1 chord, A major. And you're already starting to hear a little bit of what this scale sounds like when you start mixing in the chords, all right? I think the best place to look is your 1 chord to your 4 chord. So that's what I want to start with. Let's take our 1 chord, which is A major, and I want you to listen to how that sounds like going into the 4, which is D minor. All right, so we're going from an A major chord to a D minor chord. And you can hear that's a pretty sad, strange change, right? Now, I don't want you to get confused. A lot of people might hear that minor 4 chord and think I'm just borrowing it from the parallel minor. And I did a lesson on this on the plagal chord change, the minor plagal chord change, where you're just going from the 4 to the 1. And really, that's not quite what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is literally staying in 1 key, and in that key, I have an access to a major 1 chord and a minor 4 chord. And when this minor 4 chord comes up, I'm not going to change what notes I'm playing over the top of it as a lead player. I will continue only playing the notes of Mixolydian Flat 6 over this chord progression, all right? And you can kind of hear it very briefly. I'll try to do it here just on my guitar. Here's like an A major, and then here's some of the notes of the scale, all right? So I've got the chord, and I've got some notes of the scale. Here's my 4 chord, D minor, and there's the same notes right there, all right? So right now I'm kind of combining the chords and the notes of the scale. I can also do kind of the same thing here. Let's just pedal on an open A. All right, here's just an open A string. And what I'm going to do is start playing the scale So I really like the way this scale feels, especially when you start stringing together the chords. That 1 to 4 chord, I think, is just absolutely priceless. So what I'm going to do, I've got a little jam track going on here, and it's just literally that. It's A major to D minor. And then sometimes what I do is I keep the A on the bass. So the entire time, you'll be hearing A on the bass, underneath the A major chord, and underneath the D minor chord. And that adds to this disconnected feel that we're getting. So check it out. Here's A major with A on the bass, and then here's D minor with A still on the bass. So you've got that booming and without me even playing the scale on top of that, I think you kind of get the idea that this is a unique characteristic for a scale. You know, compared to something like minor that's just dark, or major that's just bright. This to me has a very distinct feel, floating between worlds kind of feel. But I will say that it is distinctive as it is. I still sometimes confuse my ear when I'm just hearing somebody do modal interchange off of a minor 4 chord. For example, if I'm in the key of A major and somebody decides to shift into the parallel minor key of A minor while they borrow the 4 chord, that would sound like this instead, where that third note of the scale all of a sudden becomes a flatted third instead of a major third, like in our scale. A lot of players will accommodate this minor 4 chord by shifting into A minor, and then all of a sudden you lose access to that major third. So they're very similar feels. You know, the idea of using modal interchange over the 4 chord, and this idea of mixolydian flat 6 staying in that key, those are extremely similar sounds, but with practice and with composition work, you know, the more you work with this stuff, the more familiar you will be with those sounds. And I really, really advise writing something with this. I think it's very easy to just get anything good sounding just by using 2 chords. Okay? So let's listen to the jam track. I'll play a few lines on top, and I'll leave you with some final thoughts on this. So we heard what the mixolydian flat 6 scale sounds like when we're jamming over just those 2 chords, our major 1 and our minor 4. And just to balance things out, I want to show you exactly what it'll sound like if we did the modal interchange thing instead.
Что тут может быть такого нового?
Хай пиплы, на связи Кубевель и проходя в очередной раз... Хай пиплы, на связи Кубевель и проходя в очередной раз сталкер, я для себя отметил несколько странных вещей в игре, которые как бы не вписываются в игру или же как-то странно реализованы. Вот как раз таки о таких странностях мы с вами сегодня и поговорим. Наливайте кружечку горячего чая, а я пока пущу заставочку. Вот, я на своем канале прохожу сталкер по стелсу, без убийств, да и просто рассказываю о всех особенностях игры, а оказывается, что на мобилках есть игра, которая ничем не уступает сталкеру, а даже в некоторых моментах на порядок лучше. Вы наверняка уже догадались, что это один из самых амбициозных RPG проектов 2019 года, Raid Shadow Legends. Играть в Raid — это самый захватывающий опыт, который можно получить на смартфоне, и он сравним только с крупнейшими играми для ПК и приставок, и естественно игра абсолютно бесплатная. В ней все фичи, которые вы ожидаете от совершенно новой игроками, как выбирать и миру уже со всех чемпионов сами. А ну чики объекты. И вот как раз таки среди этих статических объектов есть один очень нестандартный труп. Он располовиненный, и это очень сильно разложившийся труп, который как будто бы давно уже лежит и наполовину ушел под землю. Выглядит это довольно жутко, и встретить такое вы можете в принципе много где. На самом деле я не удивлюсь, если вы на такую модель даже не обращали внимания. Я нашел две такие модели на кордоне, в лаборатории X16 и в канализациях Янтаря. Моделька очень малополигональна, но есть еще одна подобная моделька, моделька трупа псевдособаки. Вот она уже точно очень плохого качества. Настолько, что в ней трудно угадать нечто похожее на труп собаки. Но все же, если приглядеться, то это так. Трупы на свалке. Я уже как-то рассказывал о них. Находятся они в лесу, что за стоянкой бандитов на востоке. Трупы здесь только сталкеров, и, судя по снаряге, это были опытные сталкеры. Тем более странно, что они тут как-то странно разбросаны. Очень близко, и некоторые из них достаточно высоко. Кто мог так закинуть бедолагу сталкера? Ну и судя по тому, что трупы очень близко друг от друга, никто даже не успел ничего понять и попытаться убежать, как их одним махом всех прикончили. Могила Клыка. Неизвестный наемник и двое сталкеров устраивают засаду на армейских складах около деревни Кровососов. Призрак и Клык в нее попадают. В перестрелке Призрак и Клык убивают двоих сталкеров. Но неизвестному наемнику, который находился в 100 метрах, удается убить только Клыка. Призрак хоронит своего друга на окраине деревни Кровососов. Это известная несостыковка игры с реальностью, а именно даты жизни и смерти Клыка. Клык умер в 2011 году, но почему-то на его могиле датой смерти указан 2018 год. Кстати, именно в 2018 году Сталкер 2 все финансировали. Военный дезертир. Редко встретишь военного в тень Чернобыля, который не открыл бы огонь при встрече. Есть, конечно, люди майора Кузнецова, что на кордоне под мостом берут за проход. Но даже они в случае чего стреляют в Меченого. Но на агропроме есть один военный, что очень напуган и зол на свое командование. Бывший солдат разведотряда, посланный в катакомбы под НИИ Агропром для выяснения обстановки в них. Во время проведения операции рядовой сбежал, чего-то испугавшись. Выбравшись на
Ну, наоборот, значит. Последовательно. Ну, надо, да. Вот это и был он самый. Ага, я понял. Да ничего не скажешь. Достаточно смешно, да. Прикольно.
Learning guitar with YouTube videos doesn't work. You spend all your practice time looking for the best videos, and nobody shows you the right way to play songs. GuitarTricks.com is different. Friendly instructors show you every note up close. If you're
you're sick of writing chord progressions with the same 4, 5, or 6 chords, one of the quickest ways to break outside that box is to learn your secondary dominant chords. In this video, what I want to do is go over the concept of what is the dominant chord, what are our secondary dominant chords, and then really focus on how can we write music using these, where have we seen them before, in actual music, all that kind of good stuff. Now this video won't make a lot of sense unless you really understand building a major scale and building the diatonic chords of the major scale. So if you're not familiar with that concept, please check out the video I did on writing major chord progressions. I'll link to it in the description. I want to get started though by understanding the concept of the dominant chord. So here's the deal. Let's pick any major chord or minor chord. I'm going to pick G major, all right? So here's a pretty little G major. And the dominant chord is the chord that will take me to G major. There's a chord out there that when you play it, your ear is just going to be praying to come back to G major. And that's the dominant chord. I can find it just by counting up a perfect fifth. That's like 5 notes of my major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's also 7 frets away. And it takes me to the note D. And then once I find that note, I just build a 7th chord on top of it. So D7. Alright, this is the chord that will take us to G major. Listen to how strong of a landing, how definite of a resolution it was when we got back to G. There's no mistaking it. G is our home. G is our tonic. G has been tonicized. That's the word I'm going to be using quite a bit in this video. So very simply, you want to find the dominant chord of a major chord, just go up a fifth, play a 7th chord. And here's the great thing, this also works with minor chords as well. So G minor, you want to find the dominant chord of G minor, easy, go up a fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, give it a 7th chord, D7, and listen as it comes back to G minor. Very strong resolution right there. So really all you have to keep in mind is that the dominant chords will pull you back to a tonic, all right? And they're easy to find. You go up a fifth, you build a 7th chord for them. This works for major chords or minor chords. Now, if that makes sense to you, all we have to do is apply that concept to every single chord in my key. So let's figure out the key of G, all right? Key of G has a G major chord, an A minor, a B minor, a C, a D, an E minor, an F sharp diminished, and a G major. Right? So I've got all those 7 chords. I can build a dominant chord off of all these different chords. Like I had an A minor in there. What's the dominant chord of A minor? Well, go up a fifth, make it a 7th chord. That would be up a fifth is E, and a 7th chord is E7. So I can build the dominant chord of my 2nd chord. We would call that the 5 of 2, the dominant chord of my 2nd chord. And that would be an E7. E7 would take me to A minor. So how can I use that chord right there? Well, let's just play a G major chord, and let's just bring in that E7. And you see it sounds all right. It does want to come back to that A minor. And maybe let's just end with my normal dominant chord. D7 is the dominant chord in the key of G. So now I've got G, E7, A minor to G7. And that sounds good. Really, really nice, interesting chord. You can hear how much color pops up with that E7. We've all of a sudden got a note in there that is not in the key of G. Specifically, with this E7, we're bringing in a G sharp. And you're not allowed to play a G sharp in the key of G. So anytime you're introducing one of these secondary dominant chords, you're going to be introducing a non-diatonic note. And you're going to have to accommodate that. I'll talk about that a little bit at the very end of the video. We can also hear this 5 of 2 change in the song Let It Snow. That song is in the key of C. We go from a 1 to a 5, and then from our 2 to our 5. Then all of a sudden, it goes from our 2 chord to our dominant chord of the 2. And then finally back to our dominant chord to our tonic. So we got, oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Then right here, and when there's really no place to go. Hear a nice change that is a lot of tension in the middle of my verse right there. That A7 pulls me so strongly back to D minor that it's almost like temporarily, we're in the key of D minor. If you picked up the song right there, if you started playing it from right there, that's pretty clearly the key of D minor with the dominant chord in there. So, you know, it's interesting to think of these secondary dominant changes as little tiny modulations. You don't have to think of them that way, but I really like to think that these are temporary modulations into a new key, and that helps you accommodate that part later on down the line. Now, also with this song, at the very, very end of it, I like to close it off with that 5 of 2 again. It's a little bit different of a context. You got let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. And then bringing in that A7 again really cues you off to hear So that 5 of 2 to me is a really funny jazz hands, you know, shows over kind of chord. I really have a very distinct identity of it, and hopefully you'll hear that it's got kind of a like a ritzy kind of sound to it. So let's go back to the key of G for a little bit here, and I want to look at my 1 chord to my 4 chord to my 1 chord, and that 4 chord specifically, if I want to get to my 4 chord, I'd have to play a G7, but I'm starting here on a G major, right? And G7 is not in the key of G major. If I do it anyways, though, listen to how strong it's going to pull to that 4 chord. Which, once I've got there, I can do all sorts of stuff. I can borrow the 4 chord and then come back to my G. So, really nice change is that 7 chord built off of that G7 because it takes me to my 4 chord. An example of this is Hey G. Hey G is in the key of F. We've got my 1 chord, my 5 chord is C. Stay on the 5 chord, make it a C7. Here's my 4 chord in the key of C, here's my borrowed 4 chord. Then D7 is the 5 on 5.